Tonight, a national survey shows Islamophobia is highest in Quebec. Stephen Brown from NCCM says the results are sad, but not surprising. Muslim community leaders say the onus is on Quebec government policies. And an unprecedented fatwa from Iraq-based council calling Hamas an illegitimate organization. The edict comes after US-sponsored series highlights the experience of Palestinians under the Arab political body. Later in the show, we look at US footage of its downed drone, Russia brokering ties between Syria and Turkey, and a Canadian general suing the government for $6 million. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Catherine Bullock. A recent Canada-wide survey conducted by Angus Reid shows that 52% of Quebecers have unfavorable views of Islam. Stephen Brown, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, says this is sad but not surprising. The national survey shows varying levels of Islamophobia in the rest of the country. The respondents were asked to base their view of Islam and other religions on 4 categories, from very positive to very negative. 30% of the participants from Quebec held a very negative view of Islam. 16% of participants from other provinces also showed a very negative view of Islam. Brown says Canadians feel bad about Muslims because this is what they hear about them. Both Brown and Salam El-Moussaoui, the co-founder of Quebec's Muslim Awareness Week, agree that anti-Muslim and anti-immigration rhetoric by the Quebec government is propelling hatred against Canadian Muslims and Islam. The US European Command has released footage of its drone downed Tuesday by a Russian fighter jet. The footage shows a Russian Su-27 fighter jet colliding with a US Reaper drone, bringing the unmanned aerial vehicle down in international waters in the Black Sea. The incident occurred after 2 Russian jets conducted what the US's EU command calls an unsafe and unprofessional intercept of a US Reaper, including dumping fuel on the drone and flying in front of it. According to the US military, the drone was conducting reconnaissance when one of the Russian jets struck the propeller of the drone, prompting the drone's operators to bring it down in international waters. Russia denied that its fighter jets came into contact with the drone. Anatoly Antonov, the Russian ambassador to the US, said earlier on Wednesday that the drone is provocative, as it attempted to gather reconnaissance information to convey it to Ukraine for strikes against Russia. Thousands of Israelis joined today anti-government rallies, protesting government plan to inflict radical changes on Israel's judicial authority structure. Today's rallies were held under the banner of escalating resistance, with the main rally taking place in central Tel Aviv city. Israeli President Isaac Herzog recently presented a modified plan to solve the ongoing crisis. During his speech yesterday, Herzog warned of the outbreak of civil war in Israel due to the government plan that weakens the authority of the judiciary. The head of Israel's opposition, Yair Lapid, agreed to Herzog's proposal. The Israeli government rejected it. The proposed plan will severely limit the power of the Supreme Court of Justice, giving the government the power to choose judges. It would also end the appointment of legal advisors to ministries by the Attorney General. However, Netanyahu, who is on trial for corruption, insists that his judicial plan would enhance democracy. He says it would restore balance between the legislative, executive, and judicial powers. A fatwa, or religious edict, issued by a trans-sectarian Iraqi council from the city of Najaf, known as the Islamic Fatwa Council, has declared Hamas illegitimate as per Islamic law. According to these Muslim clerics, Hamas's reign consists of corruption and terrorism on the Palestinian civilians in Gaza. The fatwa directs believing Muslims not to pray or join, support, finance, or fight on behalf of Hamas. A spokesperson for the council says the decision is based on the series of animated video testimony titled Whispered in Gaza by Palestinian residents. The series is produced by the US-based Center for Peace Communications. The series, which has been viewed across the world by millions of Arabs and Muslims, has sparked outrage against Hamas. The fatwa has spawned a huge reaction from Muslims worldwide. Lebanon's anti-Hezbollah Central News Agency has welcomed the decision. The ruling is also welcomed in Ramallah by the Palestinian Authority, which lost power to Hamas in 2007. Japan and South Korea pledged renewed diplomacy as leaders of the two countries met in Tokyo today for a summit to thaw long-frozen ties. The neighbors, both key US partners in the region, have for years been locked in a bitter dispute over Japan's use of wartime forced labor. Relations deteriorated after South Korea's Supreme Court in 2018 ordered Japanese firms to compensate victims of forced labor. In a surprise move, this month Seoul announced a plan to pay those affected without Tokyo's involvement. President Yoon Suk-yeol has been keen to form a united front against regional challenges, including North Korea, which launched a long-range missile just hours before Yoon's arrival in Tokyo. After talks, he and Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced the leaders agreeing to regular reciprocal visits. Japanese media said this could include Kishida inviting Yoon to the G7 summit in Hiroshima in May. Internationally, the move has been welcomed, particularly in Washington. China, Iran, and Russia are holding 5-day trilateral naval drills in the Gulf of Oman, according to Beijing. The trilateral maritime exercises Security Belt 2023 will conclude on Sunday, China's defense ministry said in a statement. Militaries from Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran have held several joint exercises in the past as well. The Chinese ministry says its military has dispatched the guided missile destroyer Nanning to participate in the exercises, which include aerial search, maritime rescue, and ship parade. According to the ministry, Security Belt 2023 exercise will facilitate the deepening of practical cooperation among the navies of the participating countries. On the completion of the exercise, the sailors of the three countries will sum up the results of their joint work. A Canadian general acquitted of sexual assault last year has filed a lawsuit against the government and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for $6 million, reports a media source. Danny Fortin, who was removed as a logistical leader of the vaccine rollout in 2021, is suing 16 high-ranking officials. The lawsuit filed yesterday is against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and former defense and health ministers over defamation in public office. According to the lawsuit, the officials are accused of reprehensible and extreme conduct and seeks $5 million in general damages and $1 million in punitive damages. It also blamed Trudeau and other officials for negligent investigation, which caused damage to Fortin. Fortin's post at the Public Health Agency of Canada was cancelled by the government for an alleged sexual assault during his military college years. He was charged with sexual assault in August 2021 and acquitted of the charge in December. Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday was hosting Syrian leader Bashar Assad for talks as the Kremlin seeks to mend ties between Damascus and Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The meeting follows the surprise announcement last week of a Chinese brokered restoration of diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Ties between Erdogan and Assad were severed after the outbreak of fighting in Syria. Assad, who arrived in Moscow on Tuesday, voiced support for Moscow's military campaign in Ukraine and said the visit would mark a new facet in his country's ties with Moscow. Syria's civil war in 2011 strained relations between Damascus and Ankara, which has long supported rebel groups opposed to Assad. Turkey severed diplomatic ties with Syria soon after the war began. Analysts say Moscow wants to bridge the divide between the two countries that see a common enemy in Kurdish groups in northern Syria. The Kurdish groups are described as terrorists by Ankara, but backed by Washington. That's it for the news today. Thanks for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe and God bless.